2 months ago, a friend of mine sent me some pictures of flying bees, and I was really impressed. And I thought, I'd like you to see these bees. So today we're going to meet Bruce and look at his bees. Bruce Malcolm has been a friend of mine for a couple of years. He lives outside of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia, and he is a professional photographer going back to before I was born. He's a super nice guy. He's interesting. He's got a lot of good stories, and I wanted to show you some of his photographs. So what we're going to do is talk to Bruce in just a minute. But before then, thank you to my Patreon supporters and everybody who's done something else to support the channel. I appreciate you more than you know. And one quick announcement. Coming up in just a few more weeks is going to be the insect prep course that I have been promising you. I haven't figured out yet where I'm going to host it or that type of thing, but I wanted to give you an update. It's almost ready. And what I'm going to be doing is some of the material I think is particularly useful for everybody. So I'm going to do a few short videos. The course itself is going to be several hours of content, and it's only for the true masochist out there. It's detailed. Okay. Let's get on with today's activities. I actually recorded this some time ago. It's only getting out this late because of the gremlins that have now bred and taken over my entire computer. I hope you enjoy it. Bruce is a great guy. I'm really glad to have him as a friend, and he's got a lot, I think, that he can teach you about flying bee photography. So let's get over there now. Bruce, how are you, sir?
G'day, Alan. I'm pretty good. It's mid-afternoon here, of course.
Yeah, don't rub it in. Don't rub it in. So it's the dead of winter down there, right, Bruce?
That's right. We've got a little bit to go and it'll be spring, but yeah, the weather's not bad though, really, compared to where you are.
Oh, it's just horribly hot where I am. I mean, I think it's horribly hot where everybody is.
What do you call horribly hot, Alan?
100 degrees.
Oh, 100 degrees Fahrenheit you're talking about, of course.
Oh, yeah. I think you'd be on fire at 100 degrees centigrade. But the thing is, when we get 100 degrees of heat down here, we get 100 degrees of humidity with it too, and it's just horrible.
We get to about 47 degrees Celsius on our back veranda, but I can't remember what 47 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Okay.
Bruce, you're over on Discord. You help a lot of these photographers who come by, have questions and share photographs and what have you. So you're not a complete unknown, but for the rest of us, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was born in the state of New South Wales in Australia. It's about 500 k's northwest of Sydney. It puts it out into fairly harsh territory. Oh, very cold in winter and very hot in summer, and usually very dry.
Has photography been a big part of your life?
Yeah, well, the interesting point is I've been involved in photography basically all my life. I remember way back in around about 1950, when I was 10, my father, he was into photography, including D&P, developing and printing, and he lent me a Kodak box Brownie. Yeah. And I went out and I covered a street parade where they had various floats. I took some pictures, but the float that impressed me most, and I still remember this image, and believe it or not, I still have the original print. It was referring to World War II, and the motto on the float read, "Education for Peace." And I thought that was a great motto, and I think it would still hold true today. As I got a bit older, finished up doing some photography in the Gold Coast area in Queensland. Mm-hmm. And I think probably everyone in the world know where the Gold Coast is, a great part of the world.
You'd be very surprised how few of us would know where that is.
It's the Gold Coast.
The Gold Coast, yeah. Never heard of it.
It's a worldwide tourist attraction. You better Google it. But up there, I used to shoot for a few newspapers, and I did usual general stuff like portraits, weddings, that sort of stuff, general photography.
Yeah.
And after I spent a few years there, I decided to move back out west because big cities don't appeal to me at all. And I carried on basically the same there, supplying images to the local newspaper, And I also opened up a small mini lab. Is that what you call them in America?
Yeah, for printing people's.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they were on every street corner in Australia until the advent of digital.
Yeah.
And the uptake on digital was amazing, and it broke 99% of those mini labs overnight. And at the moment, I doubt if you would find one on the street corner in Sydney.
Doubt if you'd find one in America either.
I've had people here tell me that they're interested in the old-fashioned way and they're doing it, but you'd have to be a masochist because you can't get it processed anywhere, not easily. Yeah. And if you're learning photography, doing it with the old-fashioned camera, very time-consuming, and it doesn't have the immediate feedback. Yeah, well, I've done a lot of darkroom work, including colour. Boy, back then, we used to use our hands in the chemicals, developer, stop, bath and fixer. And interestingly enough, the fixer, I think, was supposed to be good for your hands. Quite often, if I had a damaged hand, I just keep working. But when colour came out and I started developing colour, I came up with a rude shock because I kept developing with my hands, and colour chemicals are extremely alkaline. After I'd lost all the skin off both hands, I decided to get a bit more scientific and use tweezers or something.
You'd have liked the man who used to x-ray my feet to put sandals on them. That's what they used to do in England to see if your shoes fit. They put you in an x-ray machine, for crying out loud, in a shoe shop.
Yeah, well, they did that here in Australia with me too. But Alan, after I'd spent an hour of them x-raying my feet and doing all that, the attendant come to me and then said, "What size do you take?" And I'm afraid I immediately lost confidence in that system.
Yeah, right.
Now, to get back to photography, I've had a lot of experience in what I'll call general photography, but I was never interested in macro photography at all. And I think that was because I couldn't see any way to make any money with macro photography. And
well, it was the same back then, was it?
That's right. And my kids had that nasty habit of wanting to eat all the time.
So you gravitated towards the things that you could make a living from doing.
That's right.
Obviously.
Exactly.
And it just never really crossed your mind. You never had any interest in doing still life or
no.
What about portraits?
Oh, I did
I've
portrait.
Seen some of your pictures of the grandkids, and you
That's right.
know how to photograph people.
Oh, I used to do portraits, yeah. But I have to admit, to be frank, I don't think I was that much. I don't think I was all very good. I don't actually know how I got away with it. But anyway, I did, and here I am.
Well, Bruce, the reason we're here is to talk about your bees and your bee photography. Let me tell everybody how this came to pass. What was going on? You have been sharing photographs with me for a couple of years now. Every once in a while, and mostly it's been still life studies, or it might be more accurate to say it's studies in light. You are photographing single blossoms and leaves and things just terribly simple, but absolutely beautifully lit. And it really caught my attention. And I thought, well, this is somebody whose photography I need to watch. And then didn't see much from you for a while. And then you sent me this a collection, some of your absolutely fantastic images here. Tell everybody what this is that we're looking at.
That's a part of a grevillea flower.
A gorilla flower?
No, sorry, a grevillea. That's an Australian native plant.
Are those things poisonous?
No.
They tell us everything over there is poisonous.
Everything in Australia is poisonous. This might be if you eat it, but I've never eaten one.
A lot of people are going to want to know when we're going to get to the bees, and I think that we should do that now.
Good idea.
Tell us why bees and why bees in flight. Okay. Let me just say, before you begin, that to anybody who's ever done macro photography in the field, there are some things that are just difficult to do. And one of them is catching insects in flight. It's very, very difficult to shoot bees in flight. Bruce sent me a whole bunch of photographs just a few months ago of the most incredible bees in flight, and you're getting ready to see them. So how did it start? Have you always loved bees?
I'd never thought about bees at all, but I was walking around the garden and I just happened to see these bees flying around, and I'm always looking for unusual pictures and slightly more difficult images, to see if I can achieve it. And I thought to myself, I wonder how difficult it would be to capture these bees handheld in flight.
My recommendation was you sit in the bush and wait for them.
That's
not
right.
Not in the bush like your bush in Australia, which is everything.
That's right.
Our bush down here is actually a bush. It's, and I would sit inside the bush and wait for the bees to come to me.
That's actually an Australian native bee, and it was flying towards that bacon and egg plant, which is another native here. And I panned with it. And
excuse me. Why? Why is it called the bacon and egg plant?
Well, it sort of looks like bacon and eggs.
No, you have some very, very bright coloured bacon and eggs over there. Okay, so
one day I'll send you some pictures of the bacon and egg plant. But this image you're showing me here, this is an Australian native bee, which are extraordinarily difficult to photograph. This is luck, really. They're smaller and faster and don't hang around very long.
What's this here we're looking at?
Right. Well, when I started to shoot these flying bees, I immediately discovered a few things. Trying to get them in the viewfinder in the plane of focus was very difficult, bordering on impossible. So I needed a way to sort of tell me where the bee was in relation to the focus plane. So I put those little sticks on there and I set them up to the distance that I want to shoot and focus there. And then I tape those sticks down with a bit of sticky tape or a couple of rubber bands, and I use that, and it works remarkably well. There's quite a few different ways you can shoot bees, and one of them is using those little measuring sticks, which I don't use honey there. I just shoot them as it happens. And I don't know whether I told you, but I actually don't look through the viewfinder or the screen on the back of the camera at all, because it's virtually impossible to keep a bee in that viewfinder. I always just look to the side and use those sticks as a measuring device to get that bee right in the middle of those sticks and hopefully exactly in the plane of focus. But it fails, of course, more than it succeeds.
Do you ever set up focus just beyond the sticks so that you don't spook the bees?
No. Those sticks don't scare the bees at all.
Okay, all right. You're shooting in high continuous, right?
I'm shooting in high continuous, but very seldom would it exceed 3, because after 3 shots, that bee is going to be in another country. That's done entirely with flashes. And come to think about it, not many. It was only 3 flashes, that one. And I think I had that big diffuser, the cardboard diffuser on the camera at the time. I put a little dab of honey just inside that lip, and the bees just flew towards it.
Oh, so this is not in the wild. This is on the ground or on a table?
I'm at a table, that little flower, or whatever you like to call it, I've just got there in a clamp.
Where were the 3 flashes?
One on the camera, one behind that bee on a table aiming up with a yellow gel, and the gel was just a piece of coloured tissue paper. Right. And in the background, believe it or not, that's a bunch of autumn leaves. And I put a flash at the back of the autumn leaves.
You sure you don't know these bees personally?
I don't know them, but I've been among them and taken umpteen thousand images of them, and I've never, ever been stung, ever. Sometimes they land on me, sometimes they land on my face, up near my eyes. I just let them be. They'll only be there a couple of seconds and they'll fly off. If you were to swat them or try to remove them, they're going to sting you, but that is the last thing they want to do. They want to fly to something, get their meal, and fly back to the hive.
But I photograph bees in the wild, and I'm cautious about them because I've been stung by bees before. I've been stung by a lot of things before.
I wonder why. If that bee is sitting there, actually you can see that it's picked up a dob of honey on its proboscis there, I can see. But if that bee is not exactly where I want it, it's a pretty simple procedure. Just pick it up and move it over a little bit. Say you want to get that bee flying towards that gum nut. What you do, you grab it on your finger like that, move it back a few inches. Now, it won't stay there long, so it will fly, hopefully, back to that gum nut. You've hopefully got your camera on a tripod. You've already got it focused where you want it, and if it flies back there, hit the button with a cable release, which you're holding in your other hand, and you might get a good flying shot.
Is that the thing?
Yeah, I can't take credit for that as much as I'd like to. But my son said to me, why don't you do that? I changed that nut to a little hollow piece of pipe that I can put the flower in.
I see.
It's just a hollow pipe and you put the stem in, and you will notice I use Celastic quite sparingly down the bottom there. I don't care what it looks like. I just want it to work.
How would you get something like this where you have it flying in profile?
You just take a lot of images out. When they fly everywhere, every which way but loose. And you have to keep shooting and just hope that they cross that plane of focus every now and again. And you will notice that the wings are a little bit strange there. That's because they beat around 300 times a second. And, sometimes they just don't photograph quite how you'd like them.
What are your camera settings?
Those ones there, I always use the highest sync speed, which is obvious because I want to keep the ambient light down.
Is that 1/250th per Canon?
Unfortunately, it isn't on my full frame 5D, it's 200. Oh, wow. But it is on the APS-C, and I think that's on my APS-C camera. I always start at the maximum sync speed, f8 or 11, usually 8, 100 ISO, and I set the white balance flash. I always try to shoot backlit, and if I can, try to shoot from a low angle to get a little bit of drama.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that is just an unmitigated fluke.
It's one of my absolute favourites.
So far, I haven't been able to train these bees to observe the rule of thirds or the golden ratio. They just won't do it. None of these flashes are modified except the backlight one, which you can see in the middle of the table with the yellow bit of cellophane on it for backlight. The sun was going in and out of these little fluffy fair weather cumulus clouds, and the backlight would disappear. It's just not right. So I put up that bit of blue you can see in the background, right in the background, and I've got a flash to the right. I've got 2 flashes right at the front of, I guess you'd call the main light, just at a slight angle, and I've got them probably 6 or 8 inches away. I've pulled out those little white reflectors in the flashes just to keep maybe a little bit of extra light going forward, but probably you don't need to do it. Those 2 on the front are actually set at 1/128th of a second power.
It doesn't seem to me like on a bright day like that 1/128 to be enough power.
It's perfect, Alan. And I'm very close, And I also zoomed to 200 millimeters on the flash.
Now, this isn't a nice bee shot.
I went out to shoot bees, and I noticed this one bee flying around, and this was where I had my camera set up on the measuring sticks. I saw this bee, and I thought, I'll try and get some shots of this bee. And when I looked back, the bee was gone. And this praying mantis had grabbed my bee and was ripping it to shreds. I mean, I had those sticks on. I had no option, so I shot all of these, not looking through the viewfinder, just sort of guessing where it was using the measuring sticks. Praying mantis ripping you to shreds and the fly having a go at the other side of it. And when I'm doing these shots using these sticks, I employ a technique that you use when you're out in the field, and a lot of other macro photographers do too. I'm shooting in burst mode. I just move the camera slightly, like forward and back, like you do. We're only talking minuscule movements here, though. We're not talking, a quarter of an inch or anything like that.
You don't do that when you're shooting the flying bees. You just hold still and let them do the moving, right?
When I'm using the sticks, I keep my eye on that bee, and if it starts to fly, I follow it. I'm trying to pan with it. And I also use rear curtain sync on the flash. But I'm not totally convinced that it works because think about it. You've got a flying bee going anywhere. You're trying to pan with it. So like the angles for rear curtain sync are not what you would normally come up with. And if you look at some of my flying shots, you'll find there are streaks caused by the ambient light. To get rid of that blur, you'd have to use a faster shutter speed for the ambient light. I did experiment with high-speed sync, but it doesn't blend with the physics of shooting close-up bees. It just doesn't work. And it's all luck. But I've discovered that the more images you take, the luckier you get.
Exactly, which is why none of it is luck. It's hard work and dedication and skill of knowing how to set this thing up.
I wanted to do some shots just for fun to see what would happen without fill-in flash. But my normal modus operandi would be to always use fill-in flash. It's a lot easier for lots of reasons, especially when the light's changing. But this one, I decided to shoot with the ambient light only. Now, as any photographer knows, you're going to get a bit of a problem with the dark shadows on the close-up side here. So what I did, I put up a couple of pieces of styrofoam each side of the camera. They work great. And as you can see, I did get a fair bit of detail in this side. And I got nice backlight through the bead. It's quite translucent.
You sent me a picture of this thing, I think just to spook me and keep me awake at night. What in the world do you have going on over there?
I don't know how I actually got those pictures. They were in the middle of that bush, and I had the little measuring sticks on, and I had to lean into the bush with the heavy camera sort of outstretched, and I just fired off a burst and sort of moved the camera. That's another one of my favourites. I like the wings there. But what saved the bacon on that image is flash. Without flash, that would have been just garbage.
And that
Very
was the one
dark.
you were telling me was bare bulb as well.
Yeah. Now, these ones are all with a polystyrene reflector, those other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favourites. I like that one.
Oh, I do too. It's clever compositionally because I don't know what the bee's looking at, but it's clever. I really hope that the folks that are watching this are going to get some inspiration and decide to give this a try. If you had one piece of advice to give photographers who are into macro photography, how to make the leap and go for insects in flight, what's the most important thing they could learn?
Well, one thing, you'd have to be fairly conversant with your settings on your camera. I mean, everything has to be on manual. That's really, anybody that knows photography knows that this has got to be on manual. If somebody, a new chum, said to me, how do you do this? We'll assume the measuring sticks, let's say. I'd use a flash on top of my camera for certain. I'd set my camera at the highest flash speed, f8, ISO 100, white balance flash, and I'd shoot in RAW if I could, because you get better editing options there. Attach those measuring sticks to measure the distance where you're comfortable shooting these insects at. Don't ever try to shoot them at 1-to-1, especially when you're starting, because it is going to be exponentially more difficult. Yeah. Come back a bit. Probably not as far as, say, 1-to-2, say half size, but getting towards that, and it'll be a lot easier. You'll get a little bit more depth of field. Set your flash on manual at about 1/8 power, zoom it to 28 millimeters, and do a few test shots and refine the power output until you get a good exposure for where you've got your distance set. And once you get outside, you may have to alter that exposure very slightly, but I don't think I ever have. When I came up with this 28 millimeter zoom, I'd been using 35 millimeter zoom for quite a while, and I thought, this is good. It's illuminating the subject just great. And one day I thought, let's try a wider one to see what happens. And I went to 28, and it gave me about a stop extra light. Now, that is diametrically opposite to what you would normally get with a flash with zooming. Right. Normally, when you zoom back, you lose power, but in this case, you actually gain power. Now you've got your camera set up, you've got the exposure set, and by the way, on burst mode, on fast burst mode, if you've got it, because you get more options, then go outside, sit down near a bush, wait till a subject turns up, try and get the subject in between those sticks and start shooting. Don't just shoot 2 or 3 pictures or 30 pictures. Shoot 300. Now, out of that 300, at least 50%, you probably won't even have a bee in the frame. Out of 300, if you're real lucky, you might get one that's got promise. You put in a new battery, recharge it, go outside, and then shoot a minimum of 500 shots. Then out of that 500, I'd be surprised if you don't come up with 1, maybe 2 passable images. If you don't, go out the next day and shoot 1,000. And out of that 1,000, I would be extremely surprised if you don't come with a couple of reasonable images.
What's your hit rate now after all of the practice and all of the experience?
If I shoot 1,000, I'd be disappointed if I don't come up like something like that one. Yeah. If I don't get something good in 1,000, I'd be surprised. But you've got to remember here, it's luck, Alan. They've got to fly through that plane of focus, and you've got to be aiming the camera there. The instant you think, I'll just aim that camera there and press the button, you'll get nothing. Concentrate on that subject and try and outthink the little brute to see if it's going to fly and where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And shoot lots of images.
It's been incredible to hear about all the work that you've done to bring this together. And if anybody wanted to see more of your photographs, where would they go? Other than possibly over to Discord, which they're going to go to anyway, because I left an invitation for them in the show notes.
If anybody goes on the Discord and if they contacted me on a direct message, I'd be really happy to explain some of these things that they might not be sure of. I'd really like to do that.
Excellent. Then that's what we'll do. I'll make sure that in the show notes there will be an invitation to anybody who's not a member of Discord to come on over and join. It's just a group of macro photographers who hang out together, share pictures and tell stories. Bruce is very active over there, so it's a place to go to talk to him, to see his photographs and maybe learn a little bit about how to do bee photography. I'm glad you're over there. I know that the rest of the viewers are glad to have you over there, and we need to keep doing this.
The only problem with the Discord, if you're out here in Australia, apart from the fellas in Australia that I've occasionally spoken to, everybody is in places that are in an ungodly time zone. For instance, you're at minus 15 hours.
We're in a normal time zone, Bruce. I'm looking at what I watch right now. You're the one that's in the crazy time zone.
Why do you always insist on contacting me in the middle of the night?
This is better than 4 o'clock in the morning. When you gave me that option, I thought, yeah, I'll stay up late, but I don't think I can get up that early.
Well, I'm glad I could help out.
Fantastic. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed watching that as much as I enjoyed making it. Bruce and I were actually on the phone for almost 2 hours. And I had to cut a lot of our chit chat out in order to get to the important part about the bees. But it was great fun. If this is something that interests you, if you think you have something going on in your life that would interest the rest of the group, then let me know. I'll be happy to talk to you. I think these things are great for building community and for getting to know one another. Those of you who are not on Discord need to be on Discord, because that's where all the cool folks hang out, like Bruce. Thanks for watching. See you again in a few days. Till then, stay safe, be well.